Hello, and welcome to another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. I'm Kyle, and this is a short show I do every week at about this time on Wednesday evening, where I talk about a board game related topic, a top 10 list, something that I am happen to be thinking about or wanting to talk about at the time. So that's kind of what Wednesday Whimsy is, and here we are. So last week on Wednesday Whimsy, I talked about a game that I've been enjoying a lot lately called The Hunger. And I compared the game to another game from, well, at one point the same publisher, with some similar mechanisms and a somewhat compatible theme called Clank. And then I realized I haven't ever really talked about Clank. And so that's what we're here to talk about today. The game of the week, of course, is Clank, but specifically Clank Catacombs. Oh, look at that light. Nice glare there. Clank Catacombs. That is the newest edition of Clank. So we're going to talk a little bit about what Clank is, how it works, some of its positives and negatives, and then I'll talk about kind of where it fits into the series as well. So without further ado, let's get going. So what is Clank about? Well, okay, thematically, you're a thief, a rogue, something like that, and you're going into a dungeon of some sort, or in this case, a catacomb, and you are trying to steal loot and escape. Whose loot is it? Well, there's a dragon in this dungeon who I guess is in charge of the loot, and you're stealing it from this dragon. There are other monsters and creatures that you're going to encounter down there. But ultimately, I guess it's all found property, and it's might as well be yours as anyone else's. So thematically, that's what you're doing. Now, as you're going to go around, I guess I can even go into how does it work. So what the game is really a deck building game. You start with a deck of 10 cards. Of the cards, 6 of them are mediocre purchasing power. 2 of them have movement on them, and 2 of them have something called Clank. And they're kind of, here we can look at kind of this board here. Clank is kind of a dead resource. What it means is you're going to take cubes and put them onto this sort of central board, and at various times during the game, a dragon icon is going to come up, and the cubes are all going to be scooped up, all the Clank you made, and put into a bag, and then a certain number of cubes will be drawn out. Clank is thematically, you're making a lot of noise and attracting the attention of the dragon and other monsters that may happen to be in the area. So what you're doing then is you're sort of constructing your deck, just like, I don't know, your standard deck building games like Dominion or Thunderstone, and you're going to be rushing through, and ultimately the goal, and this looks like it's an upgraded version, I'm wondering if we can have, I guess the ultimate goal is to get to one of these treasure spots, these artifacts, and can't seem to see any out there. But like, for example, right here, ooh, super zoomed. I love super zoom. You're trying to get to one of these artifact spots where there are going to be treasures that are worth a varying amount of points. And you're trying to pick one up, and then you're trying to make it out of this catacombs before you die. And the way you die is if you take enough damage. Every time those cubes are pulled out of the bag, it's going to give you damage. There's also monsters in these tunnels that are going to give you some damage when you move across them, unless you have a sword that you can use to combat them. And your cards, the cards you're going to be buying for your deck, are ultimately going to give you some combination of special abilities, of movement, and of purchasing power. These are sort of some of the cards. You'll see kind of this is the basic core scramble card. It gives you this blue symbol it has some, I guess it's skill, but it's what you're going to use to buy cards. And this boot icon is going to be what you use to move. There's also a sword icon that's going to come up that will let you combat monsters. And so on your turn, you're going to play all of your cards. You will then you'll use the resources they've generated to move around the dungeon. And you'll, at the end of your turn, or I guess at any point during your turn, you'll buy cards from this market. And there's some Clank from a market of cards, which doesn't seem to be out there. When the cards, then they'll go into your deck. Eventually you'll reshuffle. They'll come back into your deck, sort of traditional deck building style. So the real fun of the game is kind of not just constructing a deck that's going to get you either the speed you need or the power you need, but also kind of exploring this dungeon. Because every time when you're moving, if you come to sort of one of these end areas, one of these edges of the board, you're going to pull the top tile of a stack and orient it in a particular way, up to you how it goes. And that'll be sort of a new room to this dungeon that's ever expanding. Because it's ever expanding, you might find that you have gone much too far and are unable to get back with any ease. But there's a lot of ways to sort of combat that. In this dungeon, there are these teleporting portals where you can move from one to any other for just one movement. There are cards that let you jump around. There are various, every time I start talking, I immediately start yawning. I don't know what it is. There are various other special abilities that you can get. So there's lots of kind of ways to control how you're getting through the dungeon. But ultimately, eventually, either someone is going to die or someone is going to make it all the way back to the gate, which is kind of right here. It's where you start. And then that person is going to kind of trigger the end game of the game. Because at that point, every time it's your turn, you don't do anything anymore. Instead, you just pull cubes out of the bag. And so the cubes are going to start coming out of the bag. Now, the bag starts with a bunch of neutral cubes that are kind of dummy cubes, but as the game goes on, you'll have Clank that's gone in there. And then there are also these ghosts, like you see these two tiles here. When you get a ghost, you're going to put these white cubes in the bag, and the white cube is going to do everyone a damage and then go right back in. So it's going to kind of accelerate things. If you make it out of the dungeon, great. You score all of the points from your cards, your artifact, whatever else you happened to have. If you don't make it out of the dungeon, but you at least picked up an artifact and you got to kind of one of these pink spots, somewhere on one of these pink tiles, then you score points. You don't get a bonus, but you do score all the points that you had earned during the game. And if you die before making it out before making it to the pink spots, or you die before even picking up an artifact, you're done. You get nothing. You lose, sir. And so there's always this little bit of push your luck in there, and sort of timing when are you going to run back to the dungeon entrance, when you're going to go a little bit deeper. You're limited to one artifact, but you can also buy a backpack at some of these shops that are going to come up. Like this one right here is a shop. You'll get gold coins that you can use to buy a backpack, and the backpack allows you to pick up another artifact. So, if you picked something early, and then you want to explore a little bit more and try for a backpack and get something better, up to you. So a lot of choices you get to make in the game. And that's, the rules are pretty simple. In fact, I can teach Clank Catacombs to someone who's played Clank in about a minute, and to someone who's new in maybe 2 or 3. There's a couple of small things that you need to pick up, but if you've played a deck building game, you'll kind of understand the core mechanisms. And even if you haven't, this idea of exploring, picking something up and running out is something that's very natural to many people, and something that won't be difficult. That won't be difficult to learn. Anyway, so let's kind of exit this right here and talk a little bit about what makes the game special. So, one thing about Clank, and I'm putting Catacombs in here, but also all of the Clanks, that they do really well is give you a sense of adventure. The regular Clank is just going to be a static board, and so you can kind of see where everything is, so you can plan your route and think, okay, I'm going to go here, 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 get this, turn around, and run out. In this one, there's even more adventure because you're flipping over these tiles. You don't know where everything's going to end up. You might eventually, if you've played the game a lot of times, you might learn what to expect on some of the tiles, and you'll see, okay, this one hasn't shown up yet, so if I wait a little longer, maybe I'll find it. But I haven't played it nearly enough time to have memorized the 30 or so different tiles on there, and there's probably going to be an expansion that'll bring out 25 more. Who knows? But there's really this nice sense of discovery and exploration. All of the Clanks do that, and this one probably does it the best because, of course, you don't know what you're going to find. It's an adventure, and it's exciting around every corner. The deck building aspect itself is a lot of fun. It's not particularly complicated. There aren't like, super complex choices that you're going to have to think and rethink a million times. It's just, buy the cards that you want. And the main, more than any other deck building game, clogging your deck is a real problem in this game, right? If you buy too much stuff, you're going to find that you might end up stuck a turn or two. And, toward the end of the game, those one or two turns can be worth a lot of points because you could make it out and get a bonus, or they could be the difference between scoring and not scoring at all. So you've really got to kind of balance the idea to buy all the cool cards that come up and also the need to maintain a relatively lean deck that'll let you get the movement that you need, or that'll let you get the swords that you need, or whatever else it is that you're going for. So the deck building, while simple and straightforward, is really quite an interesting tactical exercise. And lots of the cards will give you lots of different bonuses. I mean, you look at them all and you're thinking, okay, this is good, this is good, this is good. I can't afford this. um, there's a lot of other bonuses in the dungeon to get to. There are these little secret tokens you'll get when you go to certain rooms. There are prisoners you can free. And actually, that's kind of a difference between this and regular Clank. In regular Clank, there were locked doors. And the only way you could ever get through them was by teleporting or some other special ability, or you could buy one of two keys at the store, and then that unlocked all the doors. In this one, it's a little bit different. There's a consumable resource called a lockpick, and every time you go through one of these locks, you just unlock it, and it's unlocked forever, but you've spent one of your lockpicks. Now, there's ways to get more, but they may or may not be easy to come by. It really depends on what's coming up in the game. So it kind of balances sort of the value of certain spaces, and you also use these lockpicks to get to the better stuff. So often the better treasures or the better paths are behind a lock, or there are these prisoner tokens that'll give you a bonus, or there are these large secrets that can be amazing bonuses. There's this map in there where you can move backwards across the arrows, which is amazing. It really opens the map for you, but you've got to spend your lockpicks to kind of go through and get these. So there's that. Also, another thing that's special about the game, and maybe it doesn't sound that special, is it's just a lot of fun. This is a really fun game to play. I always have a good time. I always get really excited. You can get kind of nervous and tense as you're wondering, okay, I've got to get this far. There are also these caves, these stupid caves that are bottlenecks. You can't really move out of them efficiently. So, you're sort of thinking, oh crap, I have 5 movement this turn, but the way I want to go is through a cave. So it's like I just had one. So it's just a really fun experience, and it's one that I keep coming back to in all of its various forms. So let's talk about the but. And there's not a lot of but here. Maybe a couple of things that are a little bit slightly negative. One, the text on the cards is pretty small. So, it's and this game takes up a lot of space, and yet all the cards are kind of in one area, and so it's difficult to see them maybe from across the table. It's a small negative, but it can get in the way. Another negative is, obviously there's a lot of randomness in this game. In any game where you're doing deck building, you're going to be dependent upon the luck of the draw. Your luck of the draw in what comes up in this river to purchase from, luck of the draw in what comes up in your hand, and then add to that the luck of the draw of these tiles as you're exploring. I don't consider that a negative here because it's really just part of the experience. But if you want something more strategic, maybe a deck building game, especially one that's as wild and crazy as this, might not be for you. It is possible to find yourself kind of stuck. Now, there's always ways to unstick yourselves, but I think it is possible, for example, if you went one way and everyone else went a different way, that all the treasures might open up on one side of the map, and you might find yourself unable to get over there as efficiently as some other people. Now, I haven't ever seen it happen where it was a frozen person, basically the game was over. Because there's always, there's these portals that really open it up, and there's cards that'll rotate the tiles. So there's usually a way to get out and unstick yourself. But it is a possibility, and I can see how that might be a negative experience for some people. The game is a little, in terms of game length, it might be a turn or two too long. I actually kind of liked the end game in Old Clank, where when you got to the end, you went on this cooldown track, and it basically was like there's 5 turns. It was like, 5. And you'd pull more and more cubes each turn, but eventually the game would just come to an end. And in this one, it's possible that you could finish the game, right? You finish the game or you die. It's player elimination, either self-elimination or through the effects of the game. And you might have several turns where you're not actually playing the game. You're just pulling four cubes out of a bag. And look, I'm always the person who runs out first. For some reason, I always am. So I'm okay with that, right? It is kind of fun to pull the cubes out for somebody. But I can see how that might get on someone's nerves, especially if there were a few turns or if people were taking long, slow turns. It could get a little bit dull just to be sitting there and watching toward the end of the game. Usually by that point, the game's close to over anyway, though, so I don't really think of it as a big deal. Anyway, those are a few negatives about the game. So, where's my final rating, and then where does this fit within the Clank universe? So, Clank, in all its forms, is a 10 out of 10 for me. This is just one of the most fun game systems out there. It's one of the best deck building games, if not the best. It really adds a lot more to the game than just a dungeon crawl or just a deck building game. This sort of marriage between the two is magical. It is a game I'm always looking forward to playing. It's a game I just love to bring out. I love to teach people. I love to sort of watch people light up as they find joy in this game. So for me, it's just a step away from perfect. It's a very high recommendation. Obviously, if you don't like deck building, not going to be for you. This isn't going to change your mind. If you don't like dungeon crawls, might not be for you. Honestly, the sort of dungeon and fighting monsters is done in a fairly abstract way, so you might still find it. But also, if you hated Clank 1.0, you're not going to love this one. It's not going to magically change the way that you feel about the core game because the rules to the games, to the different systems are 90% the same. So again, it's a 10 out of 10 for me. I think it'll work well for almost any gaming group. I think it'll work well for families with young children, but not super young, right? They've got to be able to read and make strategic decisions. But you could play it with your 8-year-old probably. I don't know I wonder what the recommended. It says 13 plus. I think that might be a little high. Maybe 8's a little too young, but you could probably play it with a 10 or 11-year-old just fine. Anyway, so where does this one fit into the grand scheme of things? Now, in the Clank universe of games, there's 4 games, right? There's this one, Clank Catacombs. There's Clank in Space. There's Clank, just regular old Clank, and there's Clank Legacy. All 4 games have, a 90% overlap in rules. Clank in Space is the most different because it's, in space, and it has sort of some different procedural steps that you're going to go through as a part of going through this spaceship and claiming your reward. So I find it to be the most out there. I also don't love the board in Clank in Space because it's these weird pieces that don't fit together very naturally. I do still give it a 10, maybe a 9, but a very high rating because I do still very much enjoy the game, but it is definitely my least favorite of the 4. Clank Legacy is a fantastic legacy game. It's probably the best of the legacy games. As a repeating game to play, I'm not sure, right? I think it's probably a little lower than the other games just because the legacy board is something you will remember and you will have fun with, but unless you're playing it with the people that you played the sort of legacy campaign with, I'm not sure that I don't think it would have the same joy for them. I don't know that it is as approachable as some people seem to think that it is. That's not to take away from the legacy experience and kind of the final scenario or two some of the final scenarios of the Clank legacy experience. There's sort of a not necessarily cooperative, but you're kind of working together to fight a big bad. And I enjoy that scenario, and I could see coming back to that one. So definitely not a bad review of Clank Legacy. It's just probably I like it a little bit better than Clank in Space and a little bit less than the other 2. Then we have this one, which is Clank Catacombs, which I really enjoy. I find this game phenomenal. I love the exploration. I love the discovery. And then probably the one I still like the best, though, is Base Clank. And the reason for that is that there are so many expansions to Base Clank. My deck of cards in Base Clank is humongous because I just shuffled everything in. And there are one, two, three. I guess there's four different boards, and they're double sided. I think there's four from the different expansions. It's just regular base Clank has so much stuff in it that I just it's probably my preferred method to play. I also do like sort of seeing this whole board and being able to make a plan, which you can't really do in Clank Catacombs. But to be honest, I would almost rate them the same. I mean, it's like Clank Regular with its expansions is slightly above Clank Catacombs, but as a base game experience, they're equal. Honestly, I think they're largely compatible as well. I would be worried that if you shuffled all the decks together, you might dilute some of the special effects of Clank Catacombs, like the rotating tiles. But all the icons are the same, and so I don't see that it would be a huge issue. It's just some things might not happen quite as much. But I can't see why you couldn't combine them if you wanted to. And in fact, that might actually improve the Clank Catacombs experience because you do sort of run through about half the deck in a 3-player game. So after you've played it 2 or 3 times, you might start to see kind of the same things a lot. I mean, I've seen this stupid bard that shows up in every single game, and there's 2 of them in the deck. I don't know. I'm just thinking, maybe I will combine the decks and see how that works. I don't know that it would be easy to separate them though, so be careful with that. Anyway, so I think for me it goes Clank with expansions, Clank Catacombs, Clank Legacy, Clank in Space. But this is the difference between a high 10 and a low 10. I love all of these games. I recommend them to pretty much anyone. I think they're fantastically fun. They're light enough to be approachable to anyone. They are, punchy enough that even a more experienced gamer who enjoys heavier games can really have a good time with them too. So highly recommended. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes from more of Clank Catacombs. I'm sure more will be coming. I don't know that anything's been announced, but the others were fairly well supported, so I wouldn't be surprised. Anyway, I'm rambling, so I'm going to leave Clank Catacombs with a high recommendation, and I'm going to wish you safe travels, courage when you need it, and I'll see you next time on another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. Bye bye.